The marketplace of Red River Ridge was a chaotic swirl of merchants shouting prices, horses stamping in their stalls, and townsfolk haggling over bolts of cloth or sacks of grain. But amidst the noise, Elena felt as if the world had gone silent. Her heart pounded fiercely in her chest, and a knot of fear and shame twisted deep in her stomach. She glanced at her father's hand on her arm, firm and unyielding, and then at the people passing by, unaware of the life-changing transaction taking place. "She's Barren," her stepmother whispered under her breath, so venomously sharp that it cut Elena like a whip. "No man will take her, and she's of no use to us. Sell her before she loses any value." Her father's jaw tightened. "You're right. Best to get this over with." Elena's stomach lurched. She had heard cruel words before, dismissed them as the bitterness of a stepmother's hatred, but hearing them as justification for her life being sold made her feel smaller than she had ever known. She could barely lift her eyes, afraid to meet the gaze of the man who would become her new owner, a man she had never met, a man who did not know her dreams, her fears, or her heart. The transaction itself was silent, almost mechanical. A few coins exchanged hands, the clinking sound striking her like a hammer against her ribs. The auctioneer mumbled congratulations, though Elena felt no celebration. Her father nodded curtly to the widowed rancher, a man named Caleb Hart, and stepped back as if the deal had nothing to do with him. Elena stood frozen, her hands clasped in front of her, the fabric of her dress damp from sweat. Her mind raced. What would this man expect? Would he be cruel like she imagined, or indifferent? The thought of a home without choice terrified her more than the unknown itself. Caleb, a tall man with broad shoulders and a quiet, measured presence, inspected her briefly. His eyes were not harsh, not cold. They held a sadness, a quiet grief that she could not understand. Then he nodded to her father, handed over a small leather pouch, and said simply, "She will ride with me." Elena swallowed hard. She had been treated like property before, but now it was final. Her family's betrayal had been sealed in the currency of coins. And as Caleb led her toward the wagon, she realized this was not just a sale, it was a choice she had never made, a life that had been written for her by others, and a freedom she had yet to find. The wagon creaked and groaned as it bounced along the uneven trail, the wheels kicking up clouds of red dust that clung to Elena's hair and dress. The wide plains of the frontier stretched endlessly around them, golden grasses swaying under a sky painted with streaks of late afternoon sunlight. The wind tugged at her sleeves, carrying the scent of dry earth and wild sage, but all Elena could feel was the tight knot of fear in her chest. She sat stiffly beside Caleb, hands folded neatly in her lap, staring at the worn wooden side of the wagon. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. The silence was almost unbearable, heavy with unspoken expectations and the weight of her new reality. Elena had imagined the man who now owned her as cruel or cold, but his quiet demeanor was more frightening, unreadable, unknowable. Finally, after what felt like hours, Caleb broke the silence in a low, calm voice. "I didn't buy you." Elena froze, her heart skipping a beat. She turned to face him, confusion warring with suspicion. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I mean exactly what I said," Caleb replied, his gaze fixed firmly on the trail ahead. "I didn't buy you. I didn't purchase a servant or a wife. I paid your father because I wanted to free you from them, not because I want to control you." Her chest tightened. The words felt almost unreal, as if someone had whispered a dream she had long ago thought impossible. All her life she had been treated as an object, someone to be used, discarded or ignored. And here was a man who, even in buying her freedom from her cruel family, did not intend to treat her as property. Elena lowered her eyes, unsure if tears threatened to fall. "Then why?" she whispered. Caleb's voice softened, though his expression remained calm and steady. "Because you deserve a choice. Because no one has the right to sell a person. You will ride with me to Willow Creek Ranch, and when we arrive you will decide whether to stay or leave. The choice is yours, Elena, always yours." For the first time that day, Elena felt a flicker of hope. The storm of betrayal and fear had not passed entirely, but in Caleb's quiet respect, she glimpsed a life where she might belong on her own terms, not as someone's possession, but as herself. She swallowed hard, letting a small breath escape, and for the first time, imagined that perhaps, just perhaps, the journey ahead might not be as frightening as she had feared. The sun was dipping behind the distant hills when the wagon rumbled onto the dusty drive of Willow Creek. Ranch. Elena's eyes widened at the sight of the house, a modest, sturdy cabin of sun-bleached wood, surrounded by fields of wildflowers and grazing horses. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, carrying the comforting scent of baked bread and wood smoke. Despite its simplicity, the ranch radiated warmth, as if it had absorbed the lives and memories of the people who had lived there. Caleb climbed down first, offering his hand to help Elena from the wagon. She hesitated for a heartbeat, but the firmness in his grip was reassuring, grounding her after the long, silent ride. The porch creaked under their feet as they entered, and Elena's eyes roamed across the interior. Everything bore a touch of care. Lace curtains fluttered gently in the evening breeze, dried lavender hung in neat bundles above the hearth, and a rocking chair sat quietly in the corner, polished and inviting. "My wife, Maria," Caleb said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "She passed 3 winters ago." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected grief to be so tangible, so alive in the very walls of a home. The flowers, the careful arrangements, the lingering scent of lavender, it all spoke of a woman who had been loved deeply and missed profoundly. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, feeling her own heart ache for a stranger she had never known. Caleb nodded, but there was no need for words of apology. His gaze was steady, calm, and free of judgment. Instead, he gestured toward a small wooden bench near the hearth. "Sit, rest, eat. When you're ready, you can decide whether to stay or leave. No one here will force you to do anything." Elena sank into the bench, her hands twisting in her lap. For the first time in her life, someone was offering her a choice, an opportunity to exist in a space without fear, coercion, or judgment. She had spent years being told she was worthless, that her value depended on others' desires or needs. Here in the quiet warmth of Willow Creek, she could simply be. As the evening shadows stretched long across the floorboards, Elena felt a fragile hope begin to take root. Perhaps, she thought, this home could become something more than a refuge. It might become a place where she could discover herself, unbound from lies, betrayal, and the cruel expectations of a family who had never truly loved her. And Caleb, the quiet widower with grief in his eyes, was not just a man who had bought her freedom. He was a man who, without demanding anything, had offered her a place to belong. The days at Willow Creek Ranch settled into a gentle rhythm, like the slow turning of the sun across the wide plains. Elena rose with the first light, the golden rays spilling through the lace curtains and dusting the room in warmth. She quickly discovered that life here was not like anything she had ever known. There were chores, yes, but they were not enforced with harsh words or cruel discipline. They were part of the daily pulse of the ranch, and Caleb's presence made even the hardest tasks feel safer. Elena fed the chickens, gathering eggs from the coops and humming softly to herself as the birds clucked around her feet. She scrubbed the wooden floors until they gleamed, tended to the small herb garden Maria had once cultivated, and swept the porch with care. All the while, Caleb worked nearby, tending the horses, mending fences, and occasionally glancing toward her with quiet attention. "You eaten?" he would ask, voice gentle, eyes never condescending. "You tired?" he'd inquire after a long morning under the sun. "You all right, Elena?" he asked once, his words carrying a weight of concern that unsettled her in the most tender way. Elena realized slowly, with a mixture of surprise and cautious relief, that no one here demanded her presence or her obedience. She was allowed to learn, to grow into the rhythms of the ranch at her own pace. Her family had never treated her with such respect. They had only used her as a tool to gain money, to prove false claims, to rid themselves of her existence. Here, Caleb seemed intent on letting her reclaim herself piece by piece. Yet even in this calm, a shadow lingered. Elena feared speaking of the truth, the rumor of her barrenness. It had followed her, whispered like a curse from Red River Ridge, and she worried that Caleb would think less of her if he discovered it. She pushed the fear down, determined to focus on the small comforts of the ranch. The smell of freshly baked bread, the gentle cooing of the chickens, the sound of Caleb's boots crunching across the porch. One morning, as the sun broke fully over the horizon, Caleb said quietly, almost in passing, "You don't owe me anything. Not work, not marriage, not children." Elena froze, the weight of the words sinking deep into her chest. She lowered her gaze, feeling both fear and relief. Here in this quiet, sunlit house, she was learning something she had never been taught before. That she could exist without expectation, that someone could see her as more than her supposed worth, and that a home could be built not from demands, but from patience, care, and respect. The sky darkened abruptly, the horizon swallowed by heavy, rolling clouds that churned like an angry sea. The wind whipped through the tall grasses of Willow Creek, rattling the windows and tugging at the edges of the porch. Caleb's instincts kicked in immediately, and he moved quickly to secure the animals, checking fences and guiding the horses into the safety of the barn. Elena followed, her heart racing, not from fear of the storm, but from the sudden realization that she, too, could act, could help, could be useful in a way that mattered. The first cracks of lightning split the sky, sharp and blinding, followed by the deep rumble of thunder that shook the earth beneath their feet. Rain began to pour, drenching the land in minutes, turning the dirt paths into slick mud. Elena clutched the sides of the wagon as Caleb helped the last of the animals inside. But before she could retreat to safety, a beam, loosened from the high rafters of the barn, toppled toward her. Time seemed to slow. Elena's heart leapt into her throat as the beam descended, and a scream rose in her chest. Then strong, steady hands grabbed her, pulling her away from danger. Caleb's arms wrapped around her, holding her tight, shielding her from the storm. His chest pressed against hers, his heartbeat steady and reassuring against the chaos surrounding them. The rain lashed at their faces as they crouched together in the barn's corner, soaked to the bone. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the raw vulnerability of the moment. Elena's fear ebbed, replaced by a different kind of intensity and understanding that she mattered to this man, that he would protect her, not because it was expected, but because he chose to. "Elena," Caleb whispered, voice roughened by adrenaline yet soft with sincerity. "Children don't make a home, people do. I don't need sons or daughters. I need someone who chooses to stay. I need you." Her breath caught. The words settled deep in her chest, piercing through years of neglect, shame, and fear. No one had ever chosen her, not truly. Here, in the eye of the storm, she felt it with a clarity she could not ignore. Caleb didn't care about her past, her supposed limitations, or what society said she should be. He cared only for her. And in that moment, soaked, trembling, and terrified, Elena realized she was not alone. She had a home, not a house, but a place in someone's heart, and perhaps, finally, a future she could call her own. The first light of dawn spilled over the horizon, brushing the fields of Willow Creek with soft shades of gold and pink. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh scent of wet earth and a calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the night before. Elena stood at the edge of the porch, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, watching the mist rise from the grass. The events of the previous evening weighed on her heart like a stone. Caleb's words, the near brush with danger, the intensity of his care. It all made her realize that the time for hiding the truth had passed. Her stepmother's cruel rumor, whispered like poison, had followed her for years. She was barren, useless, undeserving. It had haunted her, shaping every interaction, every expectation placed upon her. Yet Caleb's quiet kindness and unwavering respect had begun to unravel the fear she had carried all her life. Elena took a deep breath, her fingers trembling around the mug. She turned to Caleb, who had just stepped onto the porch, brushing the last remnants of rain from his coat. His eyes, calm and steady, met hers, waiting without judgment. She swallowed hard, forcing the words through a lump in her throat. "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not barren. It was a lie. My stepmother said it to get rid of me." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The sunlight caught his eyes, and Elena feared anger, disbelief, or disappointment. But instead, Caleb's expression softened. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Elena," he said, voice low and steady, "I knew that you were more than what anyone had told you. I meant what I said before. I don't need children. I don't care about that. I want you because of who you are, not because of what you can give me. I want you here with me always." Tears pricked at Elena's eyes, and she looked down, overwhelmed by a rush of emotion she had never allowed herself to feel before. He wasn't judging her, wasn't measuring her worth, wasn't expecting her to prove anything. For the first time, she was seen not as property, not as a burden, not as a rumor, but as herself. She lifted her gaze, and in that quiet moment the bond between them solidified. The fear, the shame, and the lies of the past began to dissolve under the morning sun. She realized with a clarity that took her breath away that love could exist without conditions, without expectations, without judgment. and in Caleb's steady eyes, she found the courage to believe that she could finally belong. The morning sun bathed Willow Creek Ranch in a golden glow, the air crisp and sweet with the scent of blooming wildflowers. Elena stood at the edge of the garden, brushing her fingers over the petals of lavender and daisies Maria had once tended, feeling a calm she had never known in her life. The house behind her held warmth, laughter, and quiet purpose, home she had begun to claim not because she had been given it, but because she had chosen it. Caleb stepped onto the porch, his tall frame outlined by the soft light, eyes warm and steady as they met hers. For weeks they had settled into a gentle rhythm of shared work, quiet conversations and moments of understanding that required no words. But today Elena felt the weight of a decision she could no longer delay. Her heart beat fast, a mixture of fear and hope. "I've made my choice," she said softly, stepping toward him. Her voice trembled, not from doubt but from the intensity of the moment. "I want to stay with you." Caleb's face softened, relief and joy flickering in his eyes. Without hesitation he opened his arms, and Elena stepped into them, feeling the solidity of his embrace, the warmth of his heart pressing against hers. For the first time in her life she felt safe, cherished, and truly wanted, not for what she could give but for who she was. They married quietly beneath the old willow tree on the edge of the ranch, the wind carrying the soft rustle of leaves like a blessing. There were no grand crowds, no ceremonial pomp, only the two of them, bound by choice, respect, and the deep, unwavering love that had grown between them. Elena wore a simple dress, and Caleb's hand was steady as he clasped hers, his gaze never leaving her face. Over the following days, the ranch seemed to hum with life and promise. Elena tended Maria's flowers, learning their names and habits as if continuing a legacy of love. Caleb repaired fences and mended tools, always leaving room for her beside him. And in the quiet evenings, they would sit together on the porch, sharing stories, laughter, and the peaceful satisfaction of a home built from patience and understanding rather than obligation. Eventually, the sound of tiny feet filled the house, not as a measure of worth, but as a testament to the life they had chosen together. Every laugh, every soft cry, every shared glance reminded them that family was not something bought, demanded, or forced. It was something nurtured, cherished, and earned through love. Elena finally understood that she had not only found a home in Caleb's heart, but had also become the family she had always deserved, a place where she was seen, chosen, and loved for exactly who she was. And that was enough.